What got you into the entertainment industry? Is that something you set out to do, or did it evolve because of Hayley Williams, Paramore, and all of that?
Totally. Entertainment industry was not on my radar at all. Um, Grew up in the South, and formal education was master's in education, minor in counseling,
Hmm.
and started teaching school. I was a public school teacher for 17 years, and basically, really third through sixth grade, but the majority of the years were middle school, fifth and sixth grade. I think it's because I just loved the drama.
Hmm.
um, and yeah, I was a dancer for 22 years, dance major in college. But my goal, I guess, was to be a rockette when I
Oh,
was
wow.
young. Yeah.
Okay.
But as you see my height, after sixth grade, I did not grow past
Okay.
5'2".
Yeah.
So that was out. But I just did mainly community theater. That was the closest of the entertainment industry in Mississippi that we got.
Hmm.
Okay. And when Haley was 11, she called a family meeting, which was unusual for an 11-year-old with divorced parents. We had been divorced since she was 5. And she said she wanted to be a singer. And her dad sang, and her grandfather sang, but mostly at churches and around town. That wasn't their goal either. I will have to say that Haley's grandfather just put out an album,
Oh, yes, I saw that.
which is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
But no, we were not. That was not on our radar at all. I thought I was supporting a hobby,
Hmm.
and the hobby got bigger and bigger. And I just felt like I was going to, with my teaching, I was going to start in the same school that I retire in, or retire in the same school that I started in. That was kind of like um, just wanted to be settled, family done,
Hmm.
And that doesn't mean I had a lack of ambition. It just means the turmoil that I grew up with in my childhood and in my past, I was ready for some stability.
Yeah.
Um, but when Haley called us, in a meeting and said, "I want to be a singer," we were like, "You've never sang in public before. You've done piano lessons and recitals and dance recitals and always talent shows, and her and her friends would lip sync to NSYNC. So we were kind of surprised with that, and honestly, it kind of, one person led us to the next,
Hmm.
and it kept getting bigger. Um, Even moving to Nashville in 2001, I kept saying, "This is a great hobby."
Yeah.
um, so she really, I guess, we dove in headfirst with her
Yeah.
because we weren't going to let her do it without us.
Hmm.
You know,
So then you basically got a front row seat to see what it's like in the shoes of an entertainer and all of the struggles that they deal with, off stage, behind the
absolutely,
scenes.
absolutely. Um, so when that happened, Paramore was signed in 2004. 2005, we went on the road, and sorry, um, we went on the road, and um, it's so crazy to even say out loud. Haley's dad was driving the van, and now we hadn't lived with each other since Haley was 5.
Hmm.
So she's 15. Haley's dad's driving the van, and I homeschooled Paramore in the 15-passenger van.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So we, as parents, during that family meeting, we decided, look, we're going to put all differences aside. This is our main focus, raising Haley. We're going to do it together, and this is our priority.
That's really impressive.
It
I'm a child of divorced parents, and to see you guys come together like that, wow.
We are a Dysfunctional, functional, extended family.
Okay.
We're all close still to this day. So, and they were really a vital part. Haley's dad and grandparents were really a crucial part. There's no way I could have done it by myself as a single mom. And we went on the road, and that's where we were kind of initiated, because in my head, I thought a tour bus was coming. I was going to have my own bunk, and but the reality was we were in a 15-passenger van. I had 4 dudes that I was responsible for their well-being. I had 3 of them that I was responsible for education. And then, after the school day, I was in charge of merch, and Haley's dad was driving, partial tour manager. When he had to go home, I stepped in and couldn't drive the van backwards. Like, I couldn't put it in reverse. Just had to keep going straight. But anyway, so we had to create a normal life in that van, which in 2005, internet was just coming up. So it was spotty. I'll just say it was the best of times and the worst of times. It was wonderful. Wouldn't trade it for a thing. And we learned so much.
Oh, I'm sure.
But what I mostly learned, and I don't want to get ahead of the questions, but I think I literally thought that it was going to phase out before it did, and she would go on to college and so forth.
And instead the opposite happened.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what were some of those initial things you were seeing out on the road that were impacting mental health, and where you started to go, oh, I'm sure a lot of artists are dealing with these situations?
We were fortunate because we had a label behind us. We did not have a big budget. I met bands on the road, though, that didn't even know if they were going to make it to the next venue, sleeping on fans' floors, doing what you have to do. And I really learned how much people sacrifice, and I guess you could call it paying their dues. But I saw the imploding of the bands, the disagreements, the partners left at home, kids or not, and there was so much uncertainty with those bands. Some of them were signed to independent labels. Some of them had the support of their parents, but they didn't know where they were going. They didn't have a plan. All they wanted to do was get on that stage every night for 30, 45 minutes, play their set, and I fell in love with them.
Yeah. And in those early days, were you doing the Vans Warp Tour circuit?
Well, I kind of got out of that.
Okay.
Haley's dad did the Warp Tour. I visited and helped and came out when I could.
Yeah.
But oh man, that is brutal.
Yeah.
It is brutal.
I was just starting in the industry, specifically in PR.
Yeah.
And it was one of the last few Warp Tours, and I was involved on the PR side, going on site and like helping facilitate interviews, and just going, whoa, this is like a traveling festival that is just its own thing.
Yeah. I mean, Kevin had it down, but it was tough living especially if you were in a van.
Yeah. Right. And so at what point did you launch Shading the Limelight?
So as we were traveling, and Atlantic Records was very smart because they knew that we were not going to throw Hayley into a van full of guys and just let her go. So I think all parents in this business want to be informed, protect, and included. And Haley's dad and I never wanted to manage. because we wanted the experts to manage.
Yeah.
All right. And there was some trying times at the beginning. We fired a manager. I think our goal was, and I say I think because I don't think we ever spoke it out loud, but it was just an unspoken goal that we were going to build a team around Paramore that we felt had their best interest, that knew the business, and that cared about not only their talent, but their well-being.
That's hard to find.
Yes. And that, hence, we fired the first manager, and we learned, talking about, what I learned on the road is, the struggles of the band's relationships, working with no money. But in that van, that was the year that Britney Spears shaved her head. She gave her mother restraining orders so she could not see her grandchildren. And Mike, all of a sudden, I got hit with a wave in that van. I had a silent meltdown because I kept thinking, what the hell did I get my family into? Like, I took it all on myself. I'm the guilty party. My desire had nothing to do with Hayley's career. It was, I want Hayley to come home for Christmas at age 30.
Yeah.
So my priorities changed a lot being on the road. And then I thought, who else is feeling this way? And how are these kids, I say kids, some of them were 30, going out on the road, who's supporting them? So that's when I started asking a lot of questions that I probably should have asked at the beginning, but I just didn't know to.
Yeah, you didn't. Yeah.
I started asking the bands that we met, in the green room, lots of downtime. Who's supporting you? Did your parents support you? And there was yes, no, and my parents are giving me a year. One kid said, as long as I finish my GED. It was so many dynamics. And so I started asking managers and labels, like anybody I could get a hold of. And I just said, who's taking care of your artist? And I'm not talking about the serious self-harm, substance abuse, where need to stop, go to rehab, but who's taking care of them with healthy relationships and regulating their emotions and
all the things that do lead to substance abuse a lot of the times.
Absolutely. And everybody I spoke to kind of passed the buck. One manager said, well, they're over 21. They should take care of themselves. The label said the manager should do it, And then I asked Paramore's manager, and he said, well, that's why we have you and Joey on the road. Of course he was kidding.
Yeah.
But anyway, I really started researching and diving into, okay, if Paramore has a problem, I want the best, I wouldn't operate on my own child if I was a surgeon. So, who's going to do this? Where do we go? And that's kind of how it, I kept hearing the word life coach. I kept hearing the word, and of course we were in the entertainment, and I was like, how can I bridge this together? And it happened. I woke up one night at 2:00 in the morning, and it was just like, the first words that came to mind was entertainment life coach, and I had a minor in counseling. I was very used to talking um, to all ages, even parents with parent-teacher conferences. But I wanted practical information to be able to help other bands. So I got my NLP Master Practitioner's license and certification in emotional and social intelligence, and really started as I was talking to these bands. They were like, "Hey, can I call you sometime?"
Yeah.
So I started talking to, families and bands pro bono, and I just thought I was spending a lot of time with that, and I thought my purpose has changed.
Yeah.
I kind of outgrew the sixth grade classroom.
hmm
You know,
So what were some of the things that, or actually, now that you have all this hindsight to look back over the career of doing this and helping artists navigate these situations, what are some of the issues you're seeing that are like a common thread across artists?
um, wow, it's so different for every artist because of the dynamics and even
hmm
family dynamics
Yeah.
and the artist. There's a ripple effect. It affects everyone around them, especially family and friends.
Yeah.
Um, mainly, gosh, there's a list. I'm trying to figure out where to start. Imposter syndrome, um, having the power and the wealth, and nobody saying no to you.
All right.
The temptations, the comparison of the internet and of your peers. You know, um, trying to up the ante every time you do something new, reinventing yourself. Um, just the being vulnerable with your fans. How much do I give away of my
Yeah.
private life? How much do I, writing music is so therapeutic, but then you put it out there and then everybody has their say.
Yeah.
Everybody has their feedback and their reviews and
hmm
critiques. So that's the noise in the background
Yeah.
that really, and then it's a constant, am I doing the right thing? Should I be doing something different? Not as far as career, but the rollout plan of the album,
hmm
just the
It, yeah.
trust.
Do you subscribe to Rick Rubin's philosophy of the artist or the audience comes last? Have you heard him talk about that?
I have.
Because I think
It's
about,
been a while, but I do think the audience comes last
yeah,
because I think if you're doing it right, the audience is going to be there.
yeah,
And I think they know if you're being authentic.
hmm yeah. So when you launched Shading the Limelight
Hmm.
and you started doing this work, this was pre social media, right?
It really was.
So did you see new issues arising with social media or did it just exacerbate the existing situations
I
you were
think
seeing?
both.
Okay.
Both. When we were on the road, there was MySpace,
hmm
and listen, the Haley and the guys, like we celebrated when we had 60 friends on MySpace or followers, whatever you
Yeah.
called them back then.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, and we celebrated every time we sold a CD or a T-shirt, and I mean, and these were rooms with capacity of 100, 200,
Yeah.
and just really seeing that grow over time organically was incredible. Um, I totally forgot your question.
Me too, but that's okay because
Oh, Rick Rubin. No, we passed Rick Rubin.
anyways, it doesn't matter. Let's touch on
I'm sorry.
no, it doesn't that was all good
Oh, we
information
were talking.
regardless.
We were talking about the issues, and
Yeah.
with social media, what exacerbated the issues of the artist was the comparison and hearing what you look like, sound like. Um,
That instant feedback loop
oh
with no
yeah,
filter.
right. And usually, before social media, it was just the paparazzi. Not only the paparazzi, but they had a large. So you knew how to kind of we learned how to navigate that.
Hmm.
You know, I taught a workshop in LA a long time ago called paparazzi. You know, it's like the etiquette. You know, what do you how do you be friendly and cordial, but you do not fall into their trap?
Yeah.
You know,
And we
and
see Justin Bieber actively going through this situation right now.
now they have videos.
Yeah.
I mean, now they have cameras.
Yeah.
You know, back then
It was just still images.
yeah,
Yeah. Wow.
yeah,
I think, from a regular average person out there who loves music, they don't really take into consideration all the things that artists go through aside from creating music and performing music.
so true,
Yeah.
so true, and you really don't understand unless you're in it.
Hmm. Yeah.
You know, you just don't. It's actually like fame is a paradox.
Yeah.
It's like you want to be seen, you want to be recognized, you want somebody to come up and say, "Are you, I love your song," you know, yet you're lonely and you feel invisible.
What causes that?
I think this is me, my personal experiences. The ladder of success, when you continue to climb the ladder of excess, there is no way to bring your people with you.
Mhm.
So there is a separation, there is a distance. And you know they're there when you get back down to earth, okay?
Yeah.
But you're exalted, you're worshiped.
Mhm.
And we're not designed to be worshiped and exalted. We're designed for relationships and communication and equality.
Mhm.
You know, what happens is the higher you go on that success ladder, the more distance the ground is, the more distance the relationships that you've known all your life. And now you're missing birthdays and funerals and weddings and,
Yeah.
and um, you have to be okay with that, but you also have to be okay to not compromise your values.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I started Shading the Limelight.
You talking about that reminds me of Rocket Man by Elton John. It's,
Yeah.
if anybody hasn't listened to the lyrics of that song and the story that it's telling, it's life on the road for an artist. And that separation, I think, that you're talking about.
Exactly. And when you're on the road, everybody, not everybody, every aspiring musician or tour manager or, guitar tech or whatever, like they can't wait to get on the road and it's thrilling. It's awesome.
Mhm.
Okay. But you're in a time warp. Time freezes. You are on a cycle of same thing, different city.
Yeah.
Okay. And, um, and when you get back home, you've discovered that life has gone on.
Yeah.
Like you've missed a lot. Like people, are moving on, and and you feel kind of left behind that you have to catch up. Then you feel disconnected
Mhm.
with your even your inner circle.
Yeah.
And it's kind of you got to when you get off tour. One of the things that I promote is detouring.
Oh,
You
let's talk about
have
that.
to ground yourself back. You have to enter the real world again. And a lot of artists do that with alone time or with just family time, like the first 48 hours is family time. Or um, they do laundry. They do normal life
Yeah.
because they are not in a normal life.
I mean, I can't compare myself to it, but I feel like I need that when I leave the office and go home to the wife and 2 kids.
Absolutely. Because you're switching hats.
Yeah.
And that you're switching hats from your business, your publicist, your podcast baby,
hmm
all right, to husband and maybe dad,
Yeah.
but those roles are, if you went home and talked to your wife like you run a business, I don't think she would be happy.
No, it's happened before many times.
So there is you sometimes it takes 24 hours. Some artists are faster at it than others. Sometimes it takes a week just
Yeah.
to visit your favorite coffee place.
Yeah.
Ground yourself back at home. And that is so important. And that's why the balancing and knowing how to balance personal and professional life, because it's two extremes.
Yeah. And especially for an established artist on the road.
Right.
I mean, every night you go on stage, the adrenaline rush,
Yeah.
the admiration from the audience, you come off stage and it's just a crash, right? That's what I've heard.
Absolutely. Well, there's always the couple of hours that you're still,
hmm
on that high of adrenaline, but then your emotions, when I think, and you're surrounded by people all the time. That's another like dichotomy of fame, surrounded by people all the time, and then everybody leaves.
Yeah.
And I heard Jennifer Lawrence say in an interview one time that she has to remind herself that she's just alone and not lonely, you know?
Yeah.
So I really encourage artists when they go on the road that there is a plan to keep that connection,
hmm
And it's hard because the people left at home, families, wives, husbands, partners, children, they think the only time you're working is when you're on stage.
Yeah. Right.
There's
Sure.
a lot more that goes into interviews. Sometimes you are doing acoustic shows
Yeah.
at Grammys, or is Grammys even?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, good.
Well, also, it's like if you're on the road, it's like you're going to stop by the radio station. You
Oh,
might have to do the morning show. And
photo shoots, maybe even a video,
yeah,
treatment, lots of business meetings, but
capture content,
yeah,
fan
fittings,
meet and
we could
greets.
we could just
I mean, it's an endless job description almost.
absolutely, and it's 24/7, especially with social media now.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about your approach specifically and maybe the separation between, a therapist and a coach?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's dive into it.
So, and I'll kind of start with when I started Shading the Limelight. Um, it was about 17 years ago, and I guess my job as a mom, and as everybody assumes that I managed Hayley. I just wanted to put a good team, like I said before, and then I wanted to finish my job as raising my child. And so when she was an adult, I thought, do I go back to the classroom? What do I do? I definitely have grown. I've changed. So I started Shading the Limelight about 17 years ago, and I started working with entertainers and in studios. And I started it in LA because that's where the work was.
Yeah.
And worked with studios like Disney, Nickelodeon, and my focus was preventative and proactive. It was team building, conflict resolution, building some autonomy, and just really promoting a positive working environment for everyone,
Yeah.
And I met with the way I did that was I did one-on-one sessions, I did family sessions, I did band sessions, because um, and I think that in LA, I was kind of labeled as a child star life coach. All right. Since and even though the demographic, I had bands and models and all ages, but really honed in, and needed that time in LA to figure out what was needed and how it was going to work. because studios, they don't like the press saying, uh, we're having trouble on set,
Yeah.
and I had to really educate, um, because it was so new and it was so stigmatized of mental health.
Yeah.
And that's why, you know, some of the studios were like, you can't use the word therapy. You can't, and I said, well, that's great because I'm not a therapist, you know. I'm a mental wellness coach and a practitioner. So, so I did, had all kind of sessions with one-on-one and then groups, but I developed workshops for casts for TV shows and movies, and really, it just made for. I mean, you knew people's stories, and it kind of reduced the competition or the narrative that you
Mhm.
make up in your head,
Yeah.
because you're on set and or you're in a band and like Mike plays guitar, but I don't know his fears,
Mhm.
his pet peeves, his dreams. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So so that's kind of how my business started, and um, and then I expanded uh, to Nashville, and this is home. So I made Shading the Limelight home based here, and expanded an office in LA, and there's a full time practitioner there. So she actually handles the under 18 minors, but also she has a niche for athletes, and artists and musicians, model. So it's really anybody in the entertainment
Mhm.
industry, producers, directors, showrunners, tour managers, and crew, which we really need more workshops for them.
Yeah. And it also, now that you kind of outlined it that way, it makes sense because all of these folks are under the same enormous amount of pressure to
Totally.
perform in the sense of like, I'm being judged on the last thing I just did. And in order to keep this thing going, like you said earlier, I have to keep upping the ante
That's right.
and, reinventing myself, which I mean, for an artist specifically in music, if you look at the artists who have careers that span multiple decades, they're
Mhm.
always like, there's like the Madonna of the 80s, there's a
Yes,
Madonna of the 90s. And they
absolutely.
all kind of go through this reinvention. Some of them are forced to do it,
Yeah.
some of it comes natural as well,
Right.
but there's still the constant pressure of, I got to be on.
And of uh, my album needs to be bigger than the last.
Yeah.
It's like it's constantly reinventing who you are, and as we've seen, and I was brought up in the '80s, so like I've seen bands, eh, I guess grow
Mhm.
in their music,
Yeah.
you know, and some people have a hard time with that. But I mean, first of all, you got to grow or you die,
Yeah.
you know, and bands have to grow, and you know, well, I'll kind of stop there. Sorry,
Well,
I'm
I
getting
do
ahead of
think
myself.
about like I think even just to talk about Metallica, I think there was a documentary,
Oh yeah,
right? Was it called some kind of monster or something
yes,
like
it
that, where they
was
had, I believe, a therapist come in?
during the recording of one of their albums.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that was probably a pivotal moment for that band to continue forward.
totally.
And look at them now to this day playing,
Longevity.
yeah,
That's what you want.
multiple dates at stadiums across the country,
Yes.
internationally, actually.
Incredible.
Yeah. But if they didn't fix those internal dynamics,
Right.
it may not be happening right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You've got to stay relevant, um and I think it all starts, and goes back to shading. It all starts with knowing who you are, your self awareness, how to self-manage and then getting along with other people, which is pretty much the definition of social and emotional
Yeah.
intelligence. You asked me about the difference between coaching and therapy. Therapy is, you know, psychology and therapy was actually developed, you know, centuries ago, um, 1800s. Yeah, I guess so. Centuries ago, because of mental disorders and psychological conditions, the abnormal behavior. That's
Hmm.
why it was developed.
Yeah.
That's why, you know, when I was growing up, nobody went to therapy unless something was
Yeah.
really wrong. Okay. And you didn't talk about it.
Hmm.
Um, and it wasn't until the 80s that emotional intelligence, NLP, positive psychology, was all developed because they were like, hey, we can help people be successful and happy.
Hmm.
Like, we need tools to handle life in the present moment. So, therapy usually kind of assesses the present, and then they work with the past traumas, and processing all that to get them to where they are um, able to manage the present,
Hmm.
right? Um, Coaching, and also you have state governed licenses with therapy and psychology and psychiatry. Um, with coaching, with practitioner work that I do, it is really assessing the present and moving to the future. Like, what do you want? How do you think you're going to get there?
Hmm.
Let's see, without me, and I do not tell people what to do or give them advice. We lay out all the decisions and options, and let them have time to walk through and look at the consequences with questioning.
Yeah.
Um, I also love what I do because it's not come in, sit down, and talk.
Yeah.
We do visualization, we do activities, we do um, uh, cool stuff.
Okay. Cool stuff.
But it's all about really getting to know yourself as best as you can, so that you're not caught off guard.
Yeah.
It's like in middle school. I know the middle school that I taught at had the DARE program. I don't know if it's still going on, but all they did was role model scenarios
Hmm.
so that um, when they got in that situation, they would know what to do,
Right.
or at least they would think about it.
Hmm.
You know, um, Artists, and I'm going to say the majority, okay, and my personal experience, artists have a very hard time with decision making.
I could see that.
Um, Not in their career, but in personal life,
Hmm.
because they don't have a team telling them what's best, what to wear, what interview to go on, what to plug, what to, um, I mean, even A&R listens to the music. There's a
Yeah.
lot of people's opinions.
Do you think that might be because they have their artistic vision in
Yeah.
place, but they don't have their personal vision in place?
Yeah, I think, and the younger you start in this business, arrested development is real,
Hmm.
okay? And we because because emotional intelligence, which is actually, I think it's going on its third year in public schools now, thank goodness. Uh, Taught by the counselor, and I don't know how often, but we should have taught what I educate and support and guide my clients. they should have learned that in kindergarten,
Yeah.
because in kindergarten, first grade, I just remember moving my green card to the red,
My son has the card system in his
Okay.
class.
So they know happy, they know sad, they know angry. Okay.
Mhm.
They know the core emotions until second, third grade, or the discipline ladder changes. You don't talk about feelings anymore.
Yeah.
It may be, if you have a good counselor, once a week, once a month, but it is, we gotta talk,
Yeah.
and the client needs a private space that they know they can trust.
Mhm.
And confidentiality is huge in my company.
Yeah.
Like, it is huge.
My next question was, who do you work with? I'm just kidding. Um, yeah, I think emotional regulation and all that is so important. My wife's really good at that with our kids. I get triggered, of course,
Yeah.
and she's like, "No, let them. They have to feel that and recognize it, know what's happening internally."
Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
bravo wife.
yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out to Chanel.
Yes, Chanel,
Um,
great.
yeah, and then so, how many years has it been now with Shading the Limelight?
17 years.
And you're still teaching as well.
I am. That came about 2013. Um, Haley's team were adjuncts at Belmont, and I think they said, "Do you miss teaching?" And I was like, "Yeah, I kind of miss the classroom and all the conversation or whatever." And they said, "Well, if you taught," I didn't even know I was qualified to teach at Belmont, but uh, they said, "What would you teach?" And I thought, well, I could really teach about emotional intelligence and really create scenarios in the industry and just use my personal experience um and life lessons in the industry. Um, and so they asked me to develop a syllabus, and I did that, sent it in, and it started out as like one night class a week. Um, Now it is grown into 2 days a week, and I teach two classes each day, and it's emotional and social intelligence in the entertainment industry. So I have music business students and media and entertainment students, and now it's required.
That's
Um,
great.
and so developing that and seeing that we're ready for that,
Hmm.
and it's necessary and it's crucial.
Yeah. We have people who work at Milestone who've gone through your class and said they loved it and they love
Yay!
you and they
Yay!
learned so much,
Thanks.
and interns the same. Um,
I will
yeah.
say, I I'm going to pat myself on the back and say I know I'm a good teacher. Okay, professor, whatever. All right. However, and I'm a good practitioner. However, that class makes me look so good, and I'll tell you why. Because the students come in, they have no idea what they're walking into, and they discover themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, they learn about themselves and how to handle difficult situations, how to handle difficult people, because the entertainment is a vast of wild personalities, and brutal personalities. And there's some great people in the business. I don't want to
Hmm.
overshadow that. Um, but the students come out with more confidence, more autonomy. They feel more in control of their life. And that is, first of all, it's the biggest compliment. Um, but I get a lot of accolades because they actually love, learn to accept and love themselves.
That's great.
And the first day I ask the students, um, how often do you look in the mirror and say, I love you?
Ooh, that's deep.
Like, in your eyes,
Yeah.
you know? Um, and when I ask that questions, I lose eye contact. And so uh, I can tell a lot, that there's a lot of stories in there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I my job is to make learning fun and to bring what is hidden inside them. And
Yeah.
I do believe I do that with my clients as well.
Right.
Now sometimes um uh and we do social experiments, activities in the classroom, just like and I think just my formal education of being a classroom teacher, um, I I need activities.
Mm-hmm.
I run around. I probably drive the kids crazy,
Yeah.
but we have fun. I'll do anything. Stand on my head. I always have a prop bag.
That's great.
But it's a joy to be back in that classroom.
Mm-hmm.
However, I could never leave shading and right now or Belmont.
Yeah. Well, you're working
Well,
on both sides of the
it
industry.
really interrelates so perfectly.
Yeah.
And now, Belmont is working on a mental health building on Music Row. I
Oh,
don't
that's
know.
wonderful.
So anyway, and that was announced last year. So anyway, all that being said, I think the entertainment industry as a whole is really understanding that it is needed, because if the artist knows themselves, likes themselves, and feels like they have some autonomy, then they're going to make great music and they're going to be happy.
Yeah.
You
And the
know,
same applies to the folks that are going through your course that are going to work in the industry.
absolutely. And that's I had a really hard time um, deciding to teach at Belmont or anywhere, because I didn't want it to take away what I was building with shading, um, but also uh, I thought, I need to be helping the people that are already in it.
Mm-hmm.
Then I thought, wow, I could touch, what I have 25 kids in each class. I could touch 100 kids that are going into the business. Let's saturate the people that are going into the business and educate them why it is so important for your, if you're a manager, for your artist to know how to speak to them, to know how um, to engage, to know what they need,
Yeah.
and necessary, and also know the red flags and when to call in someone with a higher skill set and expertise than myself.
Right.
And um, that is necessary too, because a lot of times managers don't know until it's too late and they have to call off a tour,
Yeah.
or a producer has to shut down set, and so I think we are destigmatizing, and I'm just
And
so excited.
you're on the front lines.
Yeah, I really am, and I think it was um, so many clients and students didn't want to say they were seeing a therapist, um, and I think I saw that change with, of course, the Me Too movement,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then uh, and now they're proud of it, and I'm so excited. I mean,
Yeah.
they raise their hand and they're like, now I was talking to my therapist yesterday, and and
Yeah.
it was
No shame.
yes, and I love that, because
Yeah.
we all need help.
Truly.
We all need help, and
Yeah.
we all need to grow. We all need to learn new skills, new tactics,
Yeah.
new strategies.
Speaking of that, let's say there's an artist that is picking up steam. things are working out in their favor right now, and you have the knowledge of what might be coming up down the road for them. What are some preventative measures they should be taking now before they get there on the road?
The first thing that comes to mind is I want to tell them you have a choice. You can always say no. We may have to deal with, and I say we because I'm going back to what I
Yeah,
told Haley
yeah,
when she was 16 and crying in my lap on an airplane saying, I can't do this,
mhm.
you know? And I said, listen, say the word, we'll pack it up, you know?
That's empowering, especially when everybody else around her is probably going, "Nope, we're gonna keep pushing."
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And Haley's dad backed me and said, I don't care how many millions we have to pay back to Atlantic. We're not losing our daughter.
yeah,
And and you know, I think I remember that memory so well because it was the first time I heard her say it.
mhm,
However, um, you know, we talked later and I was like, look, I know we say things off the cuff. I know this is your dream. I know you wouldn't know what to do with yourself if you couldn't write and perform. Um, but when you're serious, you come and tell us, and it's done.
yeah,
And people will have to deal with it.
mhm,
And so I think I had a client tell me the other day that, and I'm going to be very careful. I had a client the other day, and I've been working with her for a long time. At the beginning, it was, I can't believe this. Everything is amazing. I say yes to everything. Last time I saw her, she said, I'm just a puppet.
mm,
And she said, and I have 50 puppeteers. And she said, and I'm not even allowed to touch my own strings. And that hits hard.
yeah,
And so um it I would yeah, it the other I think I tell aspiring artists, please don't trust everything you hear. And if you're not clear on any plan or contract, you ask 1,000 questions, um, and go with your gut.
mhm. I mean, the gut instincts are real.
Totally.
Yeah,
Totally. I'm working on my somatic training certification right now because I just love tools to
yeah,
use. And man, some of the students walk in my classroom, and even artists walking into the office, uh, they push their feelings aside. They don't want to feel, so being in your body and feeling, and the mind body connection is huge
yeah,
because it's like that's why our stomach growls, you know that's why when we have stage fright, and it looks different on everybody. Your heart's beating fast, your hands are clammy, you're you go blank with your words.
mhm,
um, and it is, not to mention the judgment. So I tell aspiring artists, do not Google yourself. Now, they don't listen,
yeah.
and I don't have proof of that, but I know they do.
Yeah,
um,
the temptation is real.
Absolutely, and of course, you're wanting to know how you did, and you're really hoping for that awesome feedback.
Mhm,
You were the best ever. It was the best concert I've ever been to. All right. But, and this is statistically, one negative comment, it takes 100
Oh,
of compliments to dilute
yeah.
the negative. In fact, I read one thing that said there's not enough compliments. Like there's not enough compliments. That one thing will stick in your mind
And you ruminate on it.
absolutely, and it can be a cancer cell.
So what's not easy, what is a practice that an artist could be doing to navigate that?
Um,
Especially when they're pumping out content on social media and those comments are coming in quick and fast and you want to look at them.
Come see me. No, I think, um, I think everybody says this, but it's very hard to apply, which is, you know, think about the people who are writing the insults, um, that they're lonely in a little room, and they're probably 12 years old, Um, I tell them, I don't want you to believe the best thing you've ever read or the worst. Um, Stay in that middle ground and do not spend more than 10 minutes,
Yeah.
and because I've I've had a client sit across from me and say, going to see a doctor next week, and I'm like, why? And I'm allowed to say this too. Um, and she's like, my earlobes are uneven.
I just discovered that about myself. I have one ear bigger than the other.
Wait, hold on. Mike, you're going to screw up my story
Sorry.
here.
I just have to relate to the situation.
And now I'm looking at your earlobes. You see what happens?
I don't know which one's bigger or smaller, so
Well, no, I
but one of
had
them
this
is.
girl, and I mean, honestly, beautiful, perfect. There was nothing wrong with her earlobes, but she saw that, she read that,
Oh, no.
and
Yeah.
then she started seeing it. It was
Mhm.
dysmorphia.
Yeah.
And felt like she had to do something about it. So um, yeah, so it's and you don't, you're welcome to change things about yourself, but make sure you notice them first.
Yeah. Right.
You
Yeah,
know,
and the truth is we're not exactly symmetrical.
Okay,
Yeah.
absolutely, and we need to, especially we need to, this is so cliche. We need to love our flaws. We're perfectly imperfect.
Mhm.
But it's all true, and we need to know how to accept those, and use those flaws
Mhm.
to better our strengths.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important to hone in on your strengths. And, because when kids bring home a report card, I don't know how old your kids are, but they're
Not
going
re
to bring home
not
a
well,
report
kind of
card.
report card-ish.
Okay. But, you know, we usually concentrate on the low grades,
Mm.
and we're like, oh, good job here, but wait a minute.
Yeah.
I think we should do the opposite.
I agree.
Because I think our strengths are going to eventually bring up our flaws or the skill sets that are not developed fully as we would like them to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah, I've come to learn that later in life, like, my strengths are there for a reason, and if I'm building a team in a company or an artist is
Right.
building a team around them, know what your strengths are and then outsource your weaknesses.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Delegate.
delegate.
Absolutely, if you can.
Do you wanna talk about the Artist Essentials Toolkit?
Yes, this is something I'm so excited about. This is a new project, a new company. I co-founded a company with Allison Stoner. If you don't know Allison Stoner, look her up and you'll see lots of familiar things that she's singer, actor, dancer, businesswoman, um, uh, practitioner. She has certifications in mental health, former child star, so she's been through it, man.
Mhm.
Um, I met her on a Disney set, Camp Rock. And she was probably 13 or 14, maybe. And I guess it was in 2021. I have always been an advocate of every set needs to have a therapist or a coach, a mental wellness person, somebody,
Somebody accessible.
Yes, especially for the minors, But our first product is coming out this fall, and it's called the Wellness Essentials Toolkit, and basically it is a comprehensive, interactive, proven strategies from top industry professionals, mental health experts, that allows you to, no matter what level you are in your career, or if you're just curious about entering the entertainment industry, a wealth of information over 50.
Well, hey, I've heard 50 before.
50 videos, and they're short. They're like 3 to 5 minutes. Over 50 videos of techniques, grounding techniques, strategies for anxiety, stage fright, enrolling into a character, de-rolling. So all creatives, performers, what no one's told you in the entertainment industry. And I have always heard, there's no manual for that. There's no manual for that. Well, we actually have a product for
That's
that,
great.
and it is for the entertainment business or industry, and it is like so much information that you won't hear anywhere else.
I could already tell that it would be useful for me.
Absolutely, it really would.
Yeah.
It really would, and it is. It's incredible. We've got other things coming, but yeah, I never know when to stop building and all these irons in the fire.
We're all here to create, right?
But there is we have the landing page. We have Instagram. We just started, so yeah, check it out.
And where should people go to connect on that?
Well, Allison has a company called Movement Genius, which I could talk about all day. The product is going to be, the link will be on my website. It'll link to that product page just for logistics and accounting business. But there will be a lot more Instagram posts from Shading and from Artist Wellness Essentials Instagram. And we're slowly, developing and improving and all that, and rolling out this little rollout plan, this marketing plan. But really, really excited because we really feel like we need to lay a foundation so people at least know they have some idea of what they're going into and how to handle it.
Yeah, it's absolutely needed.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for all that you're doing for artists and for industry incomers alike through Belmont. Final question for you.
Okay.
Will you take me as a client?
I will.
Great.